projection from the 2.0, 2.2 on it, and we're just doing some diagnostics, and we're going to figure out some things on this one. First off, what we encountered was, okay, with this one it wasn't running real hot, and it was really kind of pokey and doggy, and the first thing that I noticed is this coil, it said 12 volt when he bought it. It's typical Chevy type coil or something. And one thing you guys got to watch for is on all coils, or I should say on all Opels, they've got ballast resisted ignition. It's actually in the fusible link wire that's in the car. The clear wire with the gold center is actually resistance wire. You're not really getting 12 volts to your coil. So if you buy a coil that says 12 volts, you're not going to have full juice. We hot wired the coil, and the RPM come right up, and it started running pretty decent. But it still has other problems. But at least that's the first piece. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start rolling with the rest of this one, and hopefully by the end of today we'll cover 99% of the typical problems that go wrong with Opels. Number one thing everybody wants to know, or should know, is how to tune up their Opel. And we're going to go over the basic easy stuff and pretty much show you all the common problems that goes wrong right off the bat. I guess the first things first, the choice of the component you use. This is your typical points, your stamped tin, plastic bushing, cheapy little Bosch points. You've been buying these for $5–10 wherever. I sell them for $1, but I do not recommend ever buying these things. If you do a little research and you look around, you can get a much higher quality point set with real brass bushings in and out, a grease applicator so that it keeps it from wearing down the main lobe. They have double springs in them, so they'll rev all the way to 7 grand without skipping. These will not rev past 4,500 RPM ever. And pretty much right out of the box, these things will pit and die on you within 3 months. Whereas I've had customers come in 3 years later, daily driving, and say, Todd, do I need a tune-up? It's been a while, you know. So they have a hole drilled in the center of them so they won't pit. They're just a lot higher quality piece. This will cost $10, but it's worth it. Also gap the points a little higher, because the book calls for, what, 16 and 19, and pretty much what people don't realize, you stick these points in here, and a week later, they're going to wear in this lobe to the lobe on the distributor, and you're going to drop your point gap. So your point gap goes down to 16 and lower, you're going to burn your points and eat them up. So technically, truthfully, you should gap the points on the high side, probably around 21 thousandths if you're going to use a feeler gauge or something like that, you know, but definitely gap them on the high side. The other thing on distributors, on Opel distributors, they're getting old, and because they're getting old, you have to check them for the play. So what you do is you tap the starter around till you get the lobe up on the points so that you can check your gap. That's how you have to do it anyway. Might as well show you that. You got a screwdriver handy? Thank you. So what you do is, your points are never where you want them to be to tune it up. So you take the screwdriver onto the starter. This is another easy way to, get your starter tapped around. You just take from the 13mm, which is always positive juice to the battery, this little terminal right here to the driver's side, that's what starts your car. So if you just bridge that, your car will start, or at least turn over for you, which is what I've got in mind here. I just need to tap this around. You've got 4 lobes on the distributor. You need to get the tallest lobe on the little block for the points. When you're up on the lobe and the point is at the point where it's at its highest point, that's where you check the gap at your points here. Just for grins, grab your distributor shaft and wiggle it. And see, as you can see on this, I don't know if the camera will catch it, but you're looking at exactly right there. You wiggle it, see the play in that? You gapped your points at, say, 19 thousandths. Now you've got a movement of plus 40 and minus 10. Technically, this shouldn't move very much. Officially, this distributor is shot. However, it'll run another 10 or 20 years, but you got to remember, sometimes it'll spark when it's closed, so gap them high. I typically often gap points as high as, say, 25 thousandths. If you do, they'll last a lot longer, and you'll compensate for the play in the distributor. They're pretty easy to install. It's just a matter of, it's just a matter of popping that off like so. It's easiest to do by catching the wire on the inside and pulling straight up. And then go ahead and pull your points out. Flathead screwdriver. Already pitted and thrashed. Okay, take your finger, wipe this area because there's only one wire on those points and the ground is your second wire. So it's also a good idea to take a little bit of high temp wheel bearing grease just for the heck of it and just rub it on the lobes here. You don't want to have a buildup of it because it'll fly off. You just want a thin layer of it, and then the grease applicator will catch it. And then your points will last a real long time. So you just go ahead and plunk them in the hole here. Make sure that they seated, which they did. Hold them with this thumb. Get the screw set down. And then you got these little blocks in here where you can sit there and adjust the gap, open or close. Roughly, I'm going to gap this one a little high since the distributor's got some play, but that's all there is to it. You tighten it down. Sometimes when tightening the screw, the points will move in on you, so look for that. The other thing people have to watch is when you stick this wire back on to the distributor, a lot of times this will sit too close to this. Remember, when your car moves, this plate in here will pull inward, and so your points can move and ground the points to this area on the condenser. That's a common problem that drives people nuts. So what you do is you take and you just bend this up a little. You don't want it to ground out on the case of the distributor, and you don't want it to get near the points as they swing to interfere. That's basically your tune-up. Changing the plugs is the only other component. There's a few other things to get involved with, but they're fairly cut and dry and easy. Number one thing, you just bought a cap, but this is an aluminum tier cap. And the aluminum wears out very fast. It gets a dark corrosion going on here, and the spark doesn't travel very well. The brass caps, this is the caps I sell, they have brass inserts instead of aluminum. Again, you have a problem here. This is made of brass. 90% of the time, your ignition wires have brass connectors. This aluminum will corrode against the brass because they don't like each other. I saw little particles already coming out of here that quick. But if you go brass and brass, it won't corrode, and if you have brass on the inside, again, it'll last 10 times longer. You know, and these caps are a basic $10 deal, and they last forever. Let's see here. Okay, that pretty much, okay, condenser. The only other thing that people often mess up on is the condenser itself. The condenser is located on the side of the distributor, and it takes a flathead screwdriver to remove it from here. What people don't realize is that, again, you have one wire. To complete any circuit, you have a complete circuit, positive to negative. So the other wire is the condenser touching the distributor. So if you change it or you ever work on it, or in a tune-up, you should remove it and take a screwdriver and scrape the distributor. Get the grease and the junk off of in between the distributor to the condenser, because that'll stop you cold and give you intermittent misses and all kinds of future troubles. Cool, that about covers the basic ignition deal right there.